The 76ers are going to make a franchise-altering decision on draft night. We all expect them to take a young piece to build within this core, but what if they shake things up and decide to move up or move back? Today, we'll get into some new reports that suggest considering alternate options, and we'll talk about the long-term implications of those decisions, and we'll talk about one trade target that is floating around and whether or not it makes sense for this 76ers team. A lot to break down, but welcome in to Philly Take with RB. Really appreciate everybody that has been staying up to date on all of our platforms. We're dropping content everywhere, so make sure you turn those notifications on. Don't miss any of the videos or live streams. And we go ahead and start it off with a quote from Shams Charania yesterday on the Pat McAfee show. Here's what he had to say about the Sixers receiving trade interest. He says, "The Sixers are expected to receive a ton of trade calls about the third overall pick ahead of the 2025 NBA draft. I think their goal is to draft at that pick. I think there's about 3 players they like at number 3, but they're going to get a ton of calls about number 3. So 3 players, right? Maybe there's a guy on their board that we haven't heard a lot of whispers about. Maybe there's a guy they value equally to Ace Bailey, right? And they're willing to move that pick if it means that maybe they can get their guy at 4 or 5 or 6. We don't know, right? But for Shams to say there's 3 guys, I think it's interesting, right? It's not just a lock on Ace Bailey, things to keep our eyes on here. So Shams put that out into the airwaves yesterday. And then today, we get another quote from Brian Windhorst, who was discussing the NBA offseason on NBA Today. He said the draft is going to be so complicated and that it's going to be a huge night, especially with a lot of potential trades. And he says, quote, "Either pick 2 or 3 have a chance to be in play. Maybe the Sixers will trade up with the Spurs. Maybe the Sixers will trade back. That is going to be an interesting night." So now Brian Windhorst floats out the idea of, could the Sixers move up? Could they get Dylan Harper? What would it take to get Dylan Harper? I think it's very unlikely because the Sixers, could throw in pick 35? They could throw in some future picks. It's not like they have a lot of them immediate in the next year or two. And I think other teams, especially those teams we've been talking about that missed out in the draft lottery, right? Especially in the East, the Nets, the Raptors, the Wizards, teams like that, could potentially have more of an arsenal to offer to try to move up to number 2. And I feel like it might make more sense. Even a team like the Bucks, right? If they got into a Giannis trade. So I think other teams could probably beat out the Sixers. But if the Sixers view this huge gap between Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, and they view Dylan Harper as having superstar potential for the next 5 to 10 years, and they're willing to go do it, then I'm not mad at it. You know, I think they'd be better off sticking where they're at, not having to give up future draft capital, taking a guy like Ace Bailey who's a good fit, not having to worry about that whole guard issue, right, with 4 guards on the team that you're going to have to end up paying. But we need to get into a potential trade target because we know Daryl Morey likes going star hunting. Those reports have kind of been shut down. But what about a guy who's a little bit younger in his prime who could potentially fit with the Sixers? And that player is Cam Johnson. And there's been some interesting trade history with the Sixers and Nets, as we all know, but it gets even more complicated. So we're going to talk about this, but I want to kind of clarify a little bit where the Sixers are at draft capital wise. And maybe this is partly my fault, but it has been very confusing. So I want to break it down to make it a little bit clearer to answer any questions you may have. Let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think about Cam Johnson? What do you think about trading up, back? Do they stay where they're at? Do they just take Ace Bailey and not overcomplicate it? Give me your thoughts down below. The crazy thing here is that the Sixers keeping their pick this year changed everything. And you may not understand it yet, but you're about to. The Sixers keep their pick here in 2025, right? Which means that their top 7 protected pick this year now turns into a top 4 protected pick in 2026. That means next year, as long as the Sixers do not finish in the top 4 in the lottery, they're going to give that pick to Oklahoma City. The 76ers, because they have traded their pick in 2027 already to the Brooklyn Nets, now have a chance to get that back because you can't have 2 years in a row where you don't select a first round pick because of the stipend rule. So the Sixers are currently slated to have 2 first-round picks in 2028, one via the Clippers, one via themselves. If the Sixers do convey that pick to OKC next year and they don't finish in the top 4, it goes to Oklahoma City, the 76ers now get their first-round pick back in 2027, and then they owe Brooklyn their own first-round pick in 2028, but it is top 8 protected. And shout out to Liberty Ballers with the great breakdown. Again, because the Sixers kept their pick this year and did not give it to Oklahoma City, if the Sixers do convey that pick to Oklahoma City next year, then the Sixers would have their own 2027 first-round pick without any conditions on it. In 2028, the Sixers would owe a top 8 protected pick to Brooklyn. So they would have 1 in 27 and then 1 in 28 via the Clippers. But you can also use this in trades and maybe try to get this back. They could get their pick back in 2027. But what if they negotiate a trade and they throw that in there? Meaning Cam Johnson, right? Let's talk about Cam Johnson. Would he be a good fit for the 76ers? There's a report here on Nets Wire that the Nets may use Cam Johnson in a trade for another 2025 NBA draft lottery pick. Shout out to Sharif Keaton, who wrote about this. There's a sentiment around the league the Nets could look to land a second lottery pick by consolidating and packaging some combination of Johnson picks at the end of the first round and or future draft capital. Right now, the Nets have 4 first-round picks, mostly thanks to the Bridges trade. Cam Johnson is coming off his best season in his 6-year career after averaging 18.8 points, 4.3 boards, and 3.4 assists, shooting 47.5% from the field and 39% from three-point. So, would the Nets be willing to deal Cam Johnson to try to get another lottery pick? Like I said, they have 4 draft picks in the first round this year, which is crazy. And we put together a couple mock trades, but I want to talk about Cam Johnson because he currently has 2 years left on his deal, age 29 and age 30 seasons, $20.5 million and then $22.5. So let's be honest, he's on a very valuable contract, right? If we look at his stats, I mean, this past year was probably his best year in the NBA. Now, I think we realize that he's not going to be the guy, similar thing to Mikal Bridges. Like, he's now with the Knicks and it's a wonky fit, but when he was with Brooklyn, we saw that he couldn't be the guy. He's a very good player, but he can't be the guy. However, averaging 18.8 points per game, playing 57 games this year and shooting pretty good, he's a solid 3-and-D wing. He's an adequate defender, I'd say, solid, could probably guard the 2 and 3. At some point, you may have to help cover him in team defense, but overall, I think he can handle his own, at least against 2 guards, and he's going to knock down a lot of his shots. So could he be a catch-and-shoot guy, more of the role that he played in Phoenix when they went to the NBA Finals? Yeah, I think he could do that on a really good team. He's a 6'8" small forward. You could plug him in at the 3, play him. He's 29 years old, and even if it did not work out well, then in a couple seasons, you could get off that money and, start to move forward with this rebuild. Now, do I think that the 76ers should end up doing this? No, because as I said, I'm very intent on finally building around young players. But I did make a couple of mock trades that we can look at. The first one being this. The Sixers send out Kelly Oubre, Andre Drummond, and number 3. They get back Cam Johnson, number 19, number 26, and they get that first-round pick next year. Or if it does end up, conveying to 2028, then they get it back then. So pretty much they get control of their own pick, 2 first-round picks this year, and Cam Johnson. What do you think about that? Here's another potential scenario where Cam Johnson's not even included. They just do business with the Brooklyn Nets again, mostly to regain control of their first-round pick in 2027 or 2028, whatever it falls into. But they trade number 3. They get number 8, number 26, and number 36. And I know the report said that the Nets want to get another lottery pick, but let's think about this. Who's going to let the Nets get number 3 or number 2 or number 4 and number 8? That almost sounds like a cheat code. So I think if the Nets are willing to part with number 8, number 26, and a second-round pick and give the Sixers their control back, then hey, maybe they're willing to move up. They still have number 19 and number 27 here, right? So the Nets would have 3, 19, and 27, and maybe they could move up and get their guy. Overall, I would like Cam Johnson, but I think the number 3 overall pick is a lot more valuable because it's a guy who's not 29, who's not, 30, and he's going to be able to build on his rookie contract. And I think it all comes back to Daryl Morey and knowing that there is a huge risk that the Joel Embiid, Paul George thing may not work out, right? As of right now, especially what we're seeing with the OKC Thunder, for example, team building is completely changing. And we have to realize here that the 3-star model is not the way to go anymore. So if Daryl Morey is smart and he's looking into the long term, he needs to realize that, hey, the decisions I made the last 2 years might bite me really bad. They already are, and we have a good chance of falling on our face again. So what if that happens? Well, we need to look into the next 3 to 4 years. We need to look into the future, right? And we need to have Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Quentin Grimes, and maybe a guy like Ace Bailey to really start gluing together this new core that we can build around. They need to kind of replicate what the Thunder are doing. And speaking of the Thunder, here is what they have done. I mean, obviously they've drafted well. Obviously they tanked a couple years and they collected all these picks, but trades like this, right? The Paul George trade turned into SGA and 7 picks, right? And they get Jalen Williams. They get 2 pick swaps. They get all these guys. What else? I mean, look at the picks that they drafted. Look at the Sixers versus the Thunder. Shout out to our IG team, man. Joel Embiid, Jahlil Okafor, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz is who the Sixers took. Look at the Thunder. Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Josh Giddey, Cason Wallace. Most of those guys contributing to winning. Or in this case, Josh Giddey gets traded for Alex Caruso. And I've had a lot of debates the last 24 hours with fans online who were saying that, well, Sam Hinkie didn't know what he was doing. He drafted, Nerlens Noel and Joel Embiid and Jahlil Okafor. Yeah. Well, what if Sam Presti got all these picks in the Paul George trade and was never allowed to draft any players, right? Sam Hinkie was off the cusp. You don't know what he was going to do. He traded MCW after 1 year of winning a Rookie of the Year award, right? GMs learn from their mistakes. Look at Howie Roseman in the NFL. At one point, he drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, and look what he's done since. So all I'm saying is that Daryl Morey needs to start thinking long-term, but it all depends on how they value the prospects on their board. And that is where we stick at today. So go ahead and give me all your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you think about a potential trade for Cam Johnson? Would you try to deal with the Nets to get their pick back in 2027? Give me all your thoughts down below. Appreciate everybody for tapping in. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you on the next one. Peace.